I left home for good in June of 1969 at the age of 22 when I drove away from my parents' house in Denver, Colorado to Corvallis, Oregon. This was part of my starting graduate school in computer science at Oregon State University. I had an earlier trial run at leaving home in September 1965 when I was 18 and started college. I say trial run as there was an awareness that I would always return home each June for summer vacations between classes. This marginally reflects my father's path in life when he left home for good in June 1935 to join the Army Air Corps at Chanute Field in upstate Illinois. My father escaped from home at his first opportunity after graduating from high school when he reached his majority. Earlier on, he decided that he did not want to take over the family business of being a horse and hog doctor, my grandfather's veterinarian family business. An Army recruiter stopped by the family house in Carrollton, Illinois, and Dad jumped at the offer of a real job. The Army turned out to be his version of college. He was at Chanute for 2 years learning the aircraft engine mechanics trade, then 2 more years in the Philippines being an actual aircraft mechanic, returning to Hamilton Field in California in May 1940, all in preparation for World War II. So his first 4 years as an adult were in the Army during peacetime, followed by another 3 years preparing for war before being sent to England. Dad got married at the age of 24 with May Louise Murray and quickly had a first daughter, Nancy Ellen Whiteman, several months before being sent to the hot war in Europe. After completing my master's degree work, I started my first real job as a lieutenant in the USAF at Langley AFB in Virginia, a 3-plus-year activity. Quickly followed by another 3 years as a staff programmer at a Burroughs facility in Malvern, Pennsylvania. The Burroughs job did not work out well for me and I left in April 1977 headed out to San Diego with no job in hand. So I turned 30 staying at my sister's place in Flagstaff, Arizona. My actual first Saturn return was on July 1st, 1976, about the middle of my Burroughs stint. I left for San Diego in June 1977 as Star Wars came out in local theaters. A short diversionary note about Saturn Returns: the planet Saturn has on average a 29.5-year orbital period around the Sun, nominally tagged at 30 years for convenience. Its orbit is not perfectly circular, hence the average figure. So Saturn is in the same position with respect to the background stars at its first return around the Sun. The second return for individuals occurs nominally at age 59 or 60, depending on preference. Saturn in astrology circles is known as the teacher or deliverer of hard lessons in life, and the first Saturn return for an individual is largely about rites of passage, major life changes, and a deeper understanding of one's life purpose. My father was sent with the 491st Bombardment Group to RAF North Pickenham in Norfolk, England for the duration of the war. Returning to McCord Field in Washington State in June 1945, then to Lowry AFB in Denver, Colorado for additional training in B-29 operations for the remainder of the Pacific War. World War II with Japan ended prior to the completion of his training at Lowry. Dad immediately got out of the Air Force for 3 days with the intent of going to college in Boulder, but he did a 180 and re-enlisted in the new USAF and took on a career dealing with radar and weapons maintenance and delivery by bomber aircraft. My parents got married July 29, 1946 in Boca Raton, Florida, when he was 28 years old. 1 year and 6 months later, in March 18, 1947, technically his first Saturn return, he is married, a homeowner, and expecting the birth of a son and well on his career path. 6 months later on, he turns 30 years old, August 18, 1947. So, at my father's first Saturn return, he is married for the second time with 1 son, well established in his career, and trusted and appreciated by his employer. He is living in his first real owned or rented house and on a career path leading to being an officer. He is so trusted by the USAF that he has a top-secret security clearance while in the thick of things for the maintenance and delivery of nuclear weapons. So, at my first Saturn return, 29 and a half years old, I am single, never married, no known children, unappreciated by my employer and about to be unemployed. At age 30, I am essentially fired from my second real job and in between residences, meaning homeless. I did, however, have a history of once having had a top-secret security clearance while on active duty with the USAF. I did not know it at the time, but that within 3 months I would have a secure civil service job, be in my first owned house, and make a major pivot in my life path from being comfortably agnostic to being a believer in past lives and reincarnation. I had my real career in computer programming and software contracting while in San Diego, where I lived for 30 years. Much has been said and written on the subject of a son's path through life relative to that of his father. The path is shaped by his father's life through a complex interplay of influence, emulation, and differentiation. It seems that throughout history that a son's path is often to outperform that of the father or seek a completely different directional path through life. For my father, he rejected his father's desire to take over the family business. I chose to join the USAF as had my father, but without any intention of making a career of the work. Father and mother grew up through the Depression, and that experience shaped their sense of first find financial security, then work on finding happiness, and work a path of marriage, family, and retirement. I grew up through the draft in the context of the Vietnam War and chose first find career, then work on find my path through life. Marriage was never in the cards for me, though I tried several times, finally coming to understand that I prefer to live alone and not to marry, a consequence of being INTJ plus Enneagram Type 5. So, like the general observations on a son's life, I do a bit of emulation of my father's path, followed by a complete differentiation. I took a path of working for myself for 25 years, while Dad worked for the government, always with an eye towards being eventually retired on a pension from the government. While Father was never a lifer in modern parlance, he saw the USAF as a retirement path, whereas I saw the USAF as a very short-term means to an end. As it turned out, my stint with the USAF got me a security clearance that would in time be most beneficial in my software career. Father on retirement went for a software diploma but never really did anything with it. After his retirement, he was more concerned with building a dream house, escaping from the adverse consequences of that decision, relocating to Southern California, getting divorced for the second time, marrying his third wife, and descending into death with Alzheimer's disease. I took care of my dad on and off for 5 years during his descent, but moved on in life after getting him situated in a memory care center. He died within a year after the move. During our second Saturn return around the age of 57 through 60, we enter a phase of wise elderhood, taking stock of our life choices, evaluating our health and relationships, and moving into a more meaningful and authentic phase of existence. Well, at least, that is a standard definition. Like driving a car, this is best taken with the advice of your mileage may vary in experience from that of others. In May 1977, my parents bailed out on the home building experience 1 mile north of the U.S.-Mexico border in Bisbee, Arizona. Dad built his dream home out of adobe bricks, but the property was routinely broken into by Mexican illegal aliens crossing over the border on their way up into the U.S. That happened twice while asleep in their bedroom, and more often when away on touring trips. They found a buyer for the property, took a loss on the investment, and moved to Escondido, just north inland of San Diego on the I-15 freeway. This happened while I was leaving Burroughs and staying at my sister's house in Flagstaff. So, I and my parents moved to Southern California independently and without knowing what the other was doing. In August 1977, at my father's second Saturn return, he is retired, living off of Social Security and his Air Force pension. His marriage with my mother is on the rocks. A few years later, in about 2001, the city of Escondido went through an apartment conversion scare where developers purchased existing apartment blocks and started converting them to condominiums. Tenants were offered the choice to purchase their apartment or move out. So my parents let go of the apartment and moved to Oceanside, where they purchased a better real condominium in a retirement community. Dad got involved in the community actors group, met Edna Mobley, and decided to spend the rest of his life with her. My mother described Edna as the Dolly Parton type and was bitter about the breakup in her marriage until the day she died. Edna died in November 2003 from real dementia. In July 1977, I had my first private psychic reading, culminating in my major pivot in life towards a greater understanding of reality. I was told that I had a past life in Atlantis by my church pastor. A year later, in spring 1987, I got a reading at a public church service during the so-called messages segment, stating that my name will appear on the credits of a major motion picture, much to my astonishment and wonder. I had a vague idea what the film would be about, but would not know for certain until many years later. In May 2005, I had my technical second Saturn return while living in Del Mar Heights, a up-level community just east of Del Mar in northern San Diego County. This was my second property purchase, one much more expensive than the house I purchased in 1977. I had just embarked on a very speculative hardware development project for my so-called SCM device, a USB 2.0 peripheral, dual-channel, serial controller that has bit synchronous communications capabilities. My house is being renovated to remove the old popcorn ceiling texture, repainting, and tenting for termites. The Del Mar area had been experiencing a bubble in housing prices, mine approaching a claimed $1 million figure, but the bubble burst in mid-2006 along with other properties nationwide after the peak in early 2006. Also in May 2005, my father was well into his descent into Alzheimer's disease. He was having problems with getting lost while driving on the freeways and missing turn-off exits. I took away his car keys in summer 2005, started driving him to appointments, and doing general looking after him. He still has his independent apartment at Casa de los Campanas, but the administrators there were talking with me about forcing him to move into the newly completed Palmer Special Care Residence, the memory care facility for Casa residents. Dad was a financial contributor to the Palmer Center design and construction effort. Astrology circles do not have that much to say about third Saturn returns, as most people do not reach that age. But on May 28, 2006, Dad has his third actual Saturn return. He was 88 years and 9 months old, just 3 months shy of his 89th birthday. He dies February 18, 2008, about a year and a half later on at age 91. On October 12, 2034, I will have my third actual Saturn return, 4 degrees 13.6 of Leo, when I am 87 years and 5 months old. I am at risk for dying from Alzheimer's disease, as my father and his brother died of the same causes.